Hi, I'm Calivan, and welcome to episode 3 of Bar for Beginners. This video is part of a series, so if you're new here and trying to get into Beyond All Reason, you'll probably want to watch the first video, which is linked on the screen and in the description. Large team games are a popular, if not preferred way to experience the multiplayer aspect of Beyond All Reason. Rather than everyone just building at random, players tend to assume different roles depending on the requirements of the map. This has a nice effect of creating variety between games, as your build priorities and paths will differ greatly depending on your starting position and role. Very generally, the roles can be split into two categories, frontline and backline. Players assuming a frontline role have the job of pushing up to somewhere near the middle of the map and establishing a solid line of defense. Their task is vital: hold back the enemy forces and stop infiltrators from sneaking through gaps to attack the rest of your team's bases. The forward defensive line can consist of mobile units or defensive structures, and often a mix of both. The opening stages of a game are pretty hectic for a frontliner. You don't have time to tech up or focus on your economy very much. You've got to crank out units and get them into a good position before you're overwhelmed. As a frontliner, you're expected to maintain a parity of forces against your direct opposition, while using any excess resources and build power to expand your own economy. Efficiency is the key word here. If you can take fewer losses than your opponent, then you'll have more left over to expand your metal and energy production. You're not expected to crush your opposite number and drive directly towards their production structures, but you are expected to exploit any potential weaknesses you might find. If your opponent has traded poorly with your own forces and focused too hard on building their own economy, you must be in a position to punish them for that by pushing the line forward and striking at their juicy centre. But you must also be careful. Overstretching will result in you taking losses that you can't afford to replace and will leave a huge amount of salvage for your opponent to reclaim. Backliners have got a different task. They aren't expected to immediately produce units for the front line, and instead are able to focus on building up their own economy as quickly and efficiently as possible. The exact method differs between map and position, but generally it follows one of three paths. The first is a supporting role, which often results in a strong focus on a fast Tier 2 economy. The aim is to be able to produce a decent quantity of powerful Tier 2 units faster than any of the frontliners can manage, and then use those units to either reinforce weak spots on the front line or make a strong push on the enemy. Support isn't limited to combat units. Creating some T2 construction units and trading them to your own frontliners can be a huge help, allowing them to upgrade their metal extractors early and giving their economies a big kickstart. The second backline role is normally one of air support. I'm not very familiar with this role myself, but it roughly consists of a reasonably strong focus on your own economy, while providing a large supply of fighters to patrol the front line and keep the enemy bombers at bay. Later in the game, the air player is expected to build a strong force of bombers to deep strike the enemy production, doing huge damage and setting up the conditions required for a win. The final backline role is one of deep economy. Eco players aren't expected to provide anything in the way of combat power in the early to mid game, but instead put all of their efforts into ramping up their metal and energy production. Once enough of this is in place, they are expected to use their huge resources to bring about the conditions of a victory. The exact method of this depends on the circumstances, but often it involves a liberal deployment of experimental units or superweapons. As a very rough summary, the frontline players are expected to carry the early game, the support roles are expected to back up the frontliners and help them carry the mid-game, while the backliners have the job of bringing about a victory in the late game. That said, victory is everyone's responsibility. Despite these rigid-sounding roles, there is no point sticking to your exact plan while calamity unfolds elsewhere. The enemy team is trying to win just as hard as yours is, and you cannot expect everything to go to plan. A part of the front line might collapse, your air players' patrols might be decimated, or any number of other things can go wrong. Everyone on a team must be willing to be flexible and adapt to the situation. I'll give you a common example. One point of the front line is getting seriously weak and it looks like it will be overrun in a couple of minutes. As an economy player, you can either watch it happen and then lose the game as a big lump of tanks rolls through your backline, or you can quickly switch up production and chuck out a load of units to plug the gap. A particularly narrow-minded player will just watch it happen, thinking that if they help out they'll put themselves behind the enemy economy and they'll just lose anyway. They will then get crushed by the big tank blob and blame the frontliners. What they're forgetting is there's probably a reason why that front line was breached in the first place. Perhaps their own frontliner was doing so well that the enemy eco had already made the decision to bump units. Or perhaps two of the enemy frontliners had seriously neglected their own economies and that big push was very much a victory or death scenario. Team games are big and complicated, and the team that works together and supports each other will more often than not come out on top. So let's take a look at how these games can pan out on two of the most common 8v8 maps, All That Glitters and Supreme Isthmus. So this is All That Glitters. It's a symmetrical map, so it makes it quite easy to learn, and it's designed for 8 players a side. This line here separates our front line from our back line. So we've got 4 frontline players at the top, and if we look from the north side, we've got another 4 here which are south of the line I've just drawn. Behind them, we've got the backline positions. Now, generally, whoever's going to build air normally goes in this position here because, I don't know, there's a lot of cliffs in the way and I think they need less space. The pure eco player will go next to them here. And then our support and semi-eco backliners will go at the edges. And then at the top, it's exactly the same but reversed. So you've got the air player here, you've got the eco player here, and then you've got our 2 support players here. So during the game, what you'll find is this guy here will be just ecoing, this guy will be doing air, and these people here will be doing a measure of eco, but then also pushing some forces forward to plug gaps in the hole and help out the front line. And the frontliners themselves will sort of push roughly to the middle of the map, which we can draw a line roughly here. So these people will push forward and establish a front line at the line. And then on the other side, their counterparts will do exactly the same. These 3 positions on the right of the map here, or on the left of the map, if we look from the south side, are kind of similar. The 4th position, the canyon, is slightly different. You've got the same job, but it's a bit of a different dynamic. So for one thing, you've got a geothermal vent in the canyon, which means you've got more energy to play with. And also, because of the canyon layout, it's quite hard to push out of this choke point, but also quite hard to push into that choke point, and same over here too. So, slightly different dynamic. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the 4 stages of a game. This is not any official definitions, just how I'm choosing to label them. So I've got the opening stages, which is the first couple of minutes. We've got the early game, which is anything up to maybe 10 minutes into the game. Then we've got the mid-game, which is probably the next set of 5 to 10 minutes, and then everything after that we'll roughly call the late game. So we're going to press play and see what happens, and we're going to put it on 2 times speed and just look what everyone's doing. The front-line players are all doing very similar things. They're building metal extractors and some power generation and then going into a factory. So we've got 2 vehicles here, we've got bot lab here and bot lab here, and if we go to the top we'll see exactly the same thing. Little bit of metal generation, little bit of energy generation, and then into a factory. The backliners will be doing a similar thing because you kind of need construction bots or vehicles to start off with. So it's pretty much everyone's doing the same sort of opener. So we'll pop this on 4 times so we don't take forever, and we'll just have a look. As you can see, units are coming out now and they're starting to probe around a bit. There's a few scouts coming out. People will try and sneak things past to attack some metal extraction in the rear. But generally the front line will start to be established around about here as everyone starts to set up. And we'll pause it now because we're 3 minutes into the game and just see what everyone's been up to. If we look at the 3 frontliners here, you can see they're all doing a very similar sort of thing. They've built some metal extractors, some energy generation. They've got a construction turret out each or on the way. Some of them are producing a few units and some are pushing forward to capture the forward metal spots. Goth is pushing further forward than everyone else. If you notice, he's actually purchased a transport vehicle from the air player. Not sure what he used to pay for that, but maybe he just got it donated for free. But he's going to airlift his commander to the front to get there quicker. If we look in the canyon, you'll see it's a bit different. So rather than having any units out at the moment, Kamgat's playing extremely greedy. He's got some energy converters up already. He's building a laser turret in his base. He's already built a radar. He's got 2 construction bots out building metal. And only now as he's producing his first combat unit, which will only come out 3 minutes into the game. As a frontliner, this is very risky. Ecoing hard is not your job, that's the backliner's job. And if anyone was to push Kamgat right now, he'd be in serious trouble. So let's look at the south and see what they're doing. Now we can see these all look quite similar. Their production factories out. There's a couple of light defences here. Everything else is pretty similar. They're bringing out some construction vehicles and their commanders to capture the metal spot. There's a few scout units out. I've gone a little bit different here. I moved my commander up very early and got some very early units out. I like to establish myself early and put some quite quick pressure on the enemy. So I've already gone for, I've got a laser tower here holding this side. I've got 3 more queued up here. I've got a bunch of pawns out, which are engaging the enemy already. And what I normally hope to do is if someone plays very greedily, like for instance, if I was against this guy, I would have maybe 3, 4, 5 light units in his base already, or maybe picking off his metal extractors, which would seriously slow him down. But Brisky's moved his commander forward quite early, which means I won't really be able to do much with that. If we look at the backliners, they're just focusing on their economy. There's no units out at all. They're just building their metal extractors, building their power generation, and queuing up 1 million windmills. So we'll just fast forward and then we'll just keep an eye on the front line for a few minutes. You can see a pattern has started to emerge. There's a sort of a division here where this line is kind of separating everyone. Although it looks like Mouth is starting to push into the canyon. Let's pause in on that and see what's happening. So this is what I talked about earlier about being greedy. See, Kamgat got very greedy and as such he didn't really have any units. He's only got, he had 2 Rocketeers or 3 out at this point and they're being killed by Mouth's commander. His construction bots are very vulnerable, as are his metal extractors. And even worse, there's 4 of these light tanks blitzing down the side of the map. So this is very bad for Kamgat and it looks like his greed's not going to pay off on this count. So let's just put this on 2 times and see what happens. Now you see these planes here, these are disabling planes, so they'll just stop these enemy units from doing anything. Now what's happened here is the air player has noticed that Kamgat has failed and pumped out some aircraft to try and plug the gap for him. This is good play by Sol, this is what he should be doing, but really, if we're being honest, Kamgat shouldn't put him in a position where he has to do that in the first place because this will set him back slightly. But he's able to clear them up and then he looks quite safe from now on. Although, still not doing great, he's got no metal extractors here. Mouth's trying to move through and place some defences down, so not looking great. The rest of the front line seems to be holding quite hard, so we'll fast forward again and then check back in a couple of minutes. So what we've seen here is the early game's pretty much out the way. The initial front line has been established, people are poking each other, prodding backward and forward, trying to get an advantage. Some people will be moving up some artillery units to try and shell the other front line, destroy their laser towers. Some will poke at the sides to try and get through and do some damage. But generally, if everything's going well, then the front line will hold on both sides and everyone will then try and secure all their metal nodes behind them. Although Florsom's being pushed quite hard here and as such hasn't managed to do that yet, which is a bit of a shame for him. Gove's definitely playing a lot stronger than everyone else. If we look now 8 minutes in, see his base is already quite well furnished and also he's got himself quite a nice bit of defence at the front line and he's got a vehicle factory planned and his commander's up here and he's got some defences up. So I'd say Gove's playing pretty strong. Brisky's looking a little bit weak, but really he doesn't need too much because I'm playing quite defensive at this point, so he doesn't really need too much to counter what I'm doing. Kamgat's still trying to recover from his earlier mishaps. He's got a few units out now, but still hasn't managed to reclaim all the metal nodes here and doesn't have his geo up. Now we're getting towards the middle part of the game. You're going to start to see some more powerful units come out. Obviously, this is quite a low-level game, so everyone's not crazy powerful. But the support players will be kicking out some more powerful units and it will be affecting the front line. You can see the air players have both got a nice load of fighters up to stop any bombers coming through. And people are making pushes, although not going too good. This is what I said earlier about not overcommitting. See, Syria committed very hard there to try and get through, and he got beaten back. The problem is that he lost a lot of things there, so he doesn't have those units, but also all of those units are now on the field and ready to be reclaimed, and he can't get anywhere near them. If his opponent is able to reclaim all of this, like we see each one of these tanks is 570 metal. These are another 130. There's probably like 4,000 metal on the field here, which is a huge amount. And that's going to give whoever reclaims them a bit of a boost. Yeah, there's a lot of construction bots here building up a lot of defences. I'd say really that Goth is probably carrying this whole front line at the moment. He's performing a lot better than his neighbours. I guess he's just a bit more experienced, probably knows what he's doing a bit more. You see, all that metal's gone now, that's all being reclaimed. If you're wondering what all these small units are coming out, that's something that people like to call scout spam. Build 3 bot labs, continually build ticks, put them on move orders towards the enemy and reinforce them with a few construction turrets. What this does is flood the enemy defences with light units, very cheap light units. You can look, the ticks only 17 metal each. The thing is with this game, many units later on have got very slow firing but powerful attacks. Now those units might kill a powerful unit with their slow big shots, but those slow big shots also can only kill one small unit. So if you flood the enemy with small units, you get vision on them, which means your artillery can engage from a decent range. And also, if you're going to do an attack, it soaks up loads of their powerful automated fire. So you'll see a lot of these small units being spammed throughout the map. Now we're 20 minutes in. This is when the eco players are going to start to make their mark. We can see nukes going off, nuking the front line to make gaps. And we can see some reasonably powerful units start to make a poke now. And in the next few minutes, someone's probably going to make a breakthrough, which will end up being the end of the game. That's more nukes coming out. And he's got an anti-nuke there. Now that's probably a good idea, but unfortunately, as he says, if this dies, we are all dead. And with this amount of T2 units spamming in, I don't think he's got a lot of hope. Even the T3 units are going down because there's just not enough of them to make a mark. Yeah, and that's the anti-nuke down. There goes a nuke. And this is pretty much going to be the end of the game now. There's no way you can really hold the front without many units here. The economy player is starting to push out a lot more heavy units, but I think it's going to be a bit too little too late. The problem with these heavy units when you've only got 1 or 2 of them on the field is you can easily flank them or just shoot them from a distance. And as we see now, their other fronts caved as well, and it's all going to be over very soon. And that's all she wrote. Okay, we can stop this now. And this is Supreme Isthmus. So Frontline's a bit different here because obviously we've got a lot of water to worry about. Roughly I'd say Frontline probably looks a bit like this on this side. And on this side it's probably something like that. So generally these players here will do the C. Unlike the last game when we had 4 frontliners all on the same piece of ground, on this one, what you'll generally see is the C players will fight each other over the ownership of this big stretch of water on each side, and whoever comes out on top will really help dictate the rest of the game. It's kind of like a mini 1v1, I guess, because people don't normally get too far involved with it unless other things have really started to happen elsewhere. So the benefit of winning the sea is you can come to the coast here and bombard the enemy, or here and bombard the enemy. So these are important positions and must be taken with a lot of consideration. But you still have to play quite like a frontliner because you don't want to sit there and eco for ages and then suddenly get overwhelmed by a load of early units. You've got to get early units out and do some damage with those and hold your position and try and push your enemy back. Now at the back here we've got, I don't know what's what, one of these at the back normally does the air and one is normally the hard eco, but I don't quite know which one is which, so we'll just put the A and E on there. And then these positions here generally are the support. They'll sometimes be helping the front line. They'll sometimes be helping the C players. It really just depends on who needs what. A good player will just identify what's weak, what needs their help, and help there. And then these people here are dealing with the front line. So you'll see from these two on each side will push up in the middle and establish a front line. Something like this direction here. And that's where that will sit in the middle of the map. So a bit like the last one, generally in the first few minutes of the opening stages, people will just do their initial bit of building. And then in the early game, the frontliners will push up and try and make themselves established. And the backliners will just work hard on their eco. So a bit like the last game, you'll see that the openers are all very, very similar. So people are generally building 3 metal extractors and then 2 or 3 different units of energy generation, and then going into some sort of production factory. The C players will wander over to their C and start construction over there. Tiger Roll seems to be doing that now, though Banadar hasn't really got there yet. He's just queuing up lots of windmills, so not going to expect too much from that. Just like you saw on the last map though, the front line is starting to be established. As usual, I push forward with my commander quite early because I like to do that. Remember, your commander's really tough in the first few minutes of the game. You're probably not going to die to anything unless you really make a huge mistake. So I'm just going to bully my way up to the start of the map, place down a couple of laser turrets and just deny all this area from the enemy. One thing that's worth noting is not all metal spots are equal. All these metal spots are giving 2.3. Pretty much the same elsewhere around the map. But you'll note these 4 in the very middle of the map here are giving 4.3 each. So this is effectively worth 2 metal nodes. Now by pushing up early and establishing my front line, I've kind of secured mine, which means although I've got 4 metal nodes here and 1 here, it's really the same as me having 6. Now if you look at my opponent, he's built 3, hasn't captured that one, and hasn't captured this one either, and when he does I'm going to be able to kill it. So really I'm probably on effectively twice as many metal nodes as him, which is going to make my life a lot easier. Yes, he is killing my turrets with his rocket bots, but that's not a huge problem. I can just build more. And also if they push too far I can make them run back with my peons, so I'm just going to do that. But what I've done now is I've brought a construction bot up and built a beamer tower. Beamers are just slightly longer range than rocketeers, which means that they can't just snipe them from a distance. And also they've got a lot more health. I've shut down all his beamers pretty hard there. Now, they're not longer range than a lot of the missile trucks and the artillery pieces, so it's not like an infinite amount of protection, but it will just keep him at bay just long enough for me to establish some better defences. And also, I'm not on my own. I've got anger issues. I've got Dr. Nasty here, who's built his metal and he's pushing up. And he's also got his forces close enough that he's denying anger issues his metal node too. Let's check in on the C players, because we didn't really talk about them much. So it looks like Svintry has now started to establish himself in the ocean a bit, but he's only got 1 assault frigate out. Whereas if you look at his opponent, he's got a whole base out here and he's starting to pump out ships. So I think Tiger Roll's going to push ahead and probably win this sea over here. So let's crack on a bit more and see what happens. We'll keep an eye on the front line as we did before. And we'll see what Wink's up to. He seems to be doing something a bit interesting over here. Now, this is a problem when you don't scout. So if you look, these people here have assumed that everything's safe. Because their naval player has been really slow and has just got killed because he just took ages building a base and didn't go into the water, and because everyone else just assumes things are going to be safe, there's no protection from amphibious units whatsoever. That could be hover tanks, that could be bots, but it looks like in this case it's going to be a commander, and I think I can guess what this commander's doing. I never actually saw this in the game when I played it, so I just knew this guy got pounded hard and I didn't know why, but I think we can see. They've flashed an alert message to be careful about this, but what are they going to do? They've got no units over here whatsoever, they've got nothing they can contend with, and now this commander is going to run straight into the base. Now the commander is going to die, But when he dies, you can say goodbye to these advanced metal nodes, these units, these constructors, these turrets, these construction towers. If we look at Maui, Maui now has a metal income of 10. So for 12 minutes into the game, bringing in 10 metal is not very good. If we look at his companion, which is anger issues, he's bringing in 41. So Maui's going to be in big trouble because he can't really reinforce properly. You've got to scout. This could have been avoided. So you can already see the knock-on effects of a lot of the problems here. First of all this stuff is dead because the sea was lost and therefore they can just rain missiles down on... I think this would have been I bet you would have been an advanced geothermal plant that blew up and killed everything around it. So the fact that he won the sea completely very early on means that they can just destroy all the bases along the side here. Okay, so it looks like Tiger Roll's coming online quite well now. He's got a battleship coming in to start bombarding the shore, which will make a good difference. Although one thing to Joe's benefit is he's built a Prude rather than the other geothermal plant. And he's doing quite a lot of damage. You see how powerful these naval units can be. This is why you really need to hold the sea front line, just the same as holding the other front line. It looks like it's pretty much going to be over anyway at this point. Although the eco player is definitely making a big difference now. He's cranked out a huge amount of marauders which are coming down the map and are going to hit us right in the flank. The problem is though, it's a bit late for that. These will have to do a huge amount of damage if they want a hope of evening it up. I don't think they'll be able to do that much, but I reckon they'll take this guy down. If they just focus the advanced fusion or that, then everything's going to go pop. Which they do. So they've managed to take out one player and do a massive amount of damage to Bud, but they didn't quite get his advanced fusion, I don't think. And it looks like the eco player might be able to kill it, but I'm not sure if it will be in time. Oh, that's very close. So that was a very good attack and it did a lot of damage, but again, unfortunately it's a bit too late. By this point, the South team's had one player knocked out of the fight effectively, but the North team has only really got 2 left, and surely they're not going to be able to hold up for much longer. Now that you've seen how a couple of games can pan out, you should be ready to crack on with the multiplayer. Don't worry if you don't feel too confident, you can always use the offline skirmish mode to practice. I recommend setting up a game against a Barbarian AI bot on one of the 8x8 maps. The Barbarian AI isn't amazing, but it doesn't cheat and it's particularly good at probing your defences in the early game and punishing you for leaving gaps in the line. Once you can beat one of these on a small map, try again on a bigger map. They do get progressively harder when they've got access to more resources. By the time you can manage that, you'll be better than a few players I've encountered in some public games and ready to start dishing out some hurt. Before you go, I'll leave you with a few tips. I hate top 10 lists, so here are 9 assorted things of varying importance that will probably help you out somewhat. There are 2 rankings in public lobbies, chevrons and open skill. Chevrons is just a representation of your playtime. Play lots of games and it will go up. And once you've got 2 or 3 chevrons, then you'll be accepted in most games. The other is open skill based on your wins and losses. Just ignore this and play. Teams are automatically balanced based on open skill, so just keep playing and if you get good it will go up, but don't try and chase it. Hotkeys exist, use them. There's a button you can click in the top right that shows you what they all do. Have a read through it. Beyond All Reason has got loads more useful hotkeys than any other RTS I've played, so take advantage of them. Balance your resources. There's no point having loads of build power if you don't have any metal, and no point having loads of metal if you don't have any energy or build power. Grow your economy carefully. Read the game. If your teammate needs help, help them. They might be too busy or focused to think to ask you, and the team that works together wins together. Watch your own replays, especially your losses. If you got decimated by a player, watch what they did and try and learn from it. Experiment between games. Try out both Armada and Cortex. Try out bots and vehicles and air and hovercraft and everything. Find something that fits with your playstyle. When you're in a game, stay focused. It costs a lot of resources to switch between bots, vehicles and aircraft. Pick one and stay with it until you've got a very good reason and enough resources to make the switch worthwhile. Don't try and blindly replicate any build orders you might find online. Watch them, learn from them, sure, but try and understand them and adapt them to fit the right situation. And finally, don't get greedy. When you're on the front line, defend it. Trying to push your economy too hard too early will just result in you getting punished. Remember, greed is feed. And there we go, that should have all the basics covered. Now go and play some bar. I'll be doing some more episodes in the future where I'll be focusing on some more in-depth topics, but for now the lobby awaits you. Don't let me down. And if you see me in the game, say hi and please don't nuke me. Hi there, if you enjoyed this video then please click the like button, and if you've got any questions just chuck them in a comment or come and say hi on the Discord. And as usual, if you want more of this sort of thing then subscribe to my channel and I hope to see you back soon.